You have spent 7 videos learning how to build wealth, how to earn more, how to invest wisely, how to protect what you build, how to make your money compound over decades into something that generates freedom. And now, I am going to ask you the question that none of those 7 books dared to ask. What is it all for? Not rhetorically, literally. What is the specific experience you are building this wealth to fund? Because Bill Perkins spent years watching people do something he could not stop thinking about. He watched intelligent, disciplined, hardworking people spend their entire lives optimizing for a number, a net worth, a retirement figure, a financial threshold they believed would finally give them permission to live the life they had been deferring. And then he watched them arrive at that number, and he watched them discover that the life they had been deferring, it quietly become impossible. Not because the money was not there, because the energy was not there, because the relationships were not there, because the window for the experience they had been saving for had closed while they were saving. He wrote Die with Zero not as a permission slip to be reckless with money. He wrote it as a correction to the most common and most invisible form of financial waste there is, the waste of a life that was fully funded but never fully lived. Welcome to the Wealth Edit by CosmiReads, Video 8, the final video of the series. And I want to say something before we go into the framework. 7 books, 7 layers, the psychology of your money story, the energy of alignment and co-creation, the architecture of assets and liabilities, the blueprint running beneath every financial decision, the ancient laws that have never stopped working, the game and the rules the wealthy play by, the neuroscience behind why all of it works at the level of neurons and neural pathways. That is what we have built together. And now, Perkins arrives at the end of that building project and asks the question that makes all of it worth building in the first place. He asks what you are actually optimizing for. Because Housel showed us the money story, Sincero showed us the energy, Kiyosaki showed us the architecture, Ecker showed us the blueprint, Clayson showed us the laws, Robbins showed us the game, Schwartz showed us the brain, and Perkins now showed us the life, the actual life, the experiences, the memories, the people, the moments that cannot be purchased later because they required a version of you that will not exist later. This is not the end of the series. It is the point of the series. Everything we built was always pointing here. Before the framework, a moment with Perkins himself. He is not a monk. He is not a minimalist. He is not someone who believes wealth is irrelevant. He is a hedge fund manager and energy trader who has made serious money and spent serious money, and who became obsessed with a specific question that his financial success raised rather than answered. The question was this: given that your time is finite and your energy declines with age, and the specific experiences available to you change dramatically as your life circumstances change, what is the optimal way to allocate your financial resources across the arc of your life so that you actually live the life you intended to live, rather than simply funding a future you may never fully inhabit? Die with Zero is the answer he arrived at. And the answer is both more practical and more confronting than the title suggests. It is not about spending everything carelessly. It is about spending intentionally, timing experiences to the seasons of life in which they are genuinely possible, investing in memories the same way you invest in assets, because memories, Perkins argues, generate a return, not financial, experiential. The memory dividend, the ongoing pleasure, meaning, and identity that a rich experience continues to pay long after the experience itself is over. The first key insight is the one that reframes the entire purpose of wealth, and Perkins states it with a directness that stops most readers cold. You should aim to die with zero. Not literally zero. The title is deliberately provocative. What he means is that the goal of your financial life should be to convert your money into experiences, in memories, and meaningful moments at the optimal time, such that, at the end of your life, your resources and your experiences are in balance. Not a massive unspent fortune accumulated through decades of deferral. Not regret about experiences that were always theoretically affordable, but perpetually delayed. Balance. The manifestation dimension of this insight is the one Sincero pointed at most directly, that abundance built on deprivation collapses, that the energy of permanently deferring pleasure while building wealth creates a frequency of scarcity even in the presence of accumulation. Perkins is making the same point from the other direction. You cannot practice abundance only in your financial statements. You must practice it in your actual daily life, in the experiences you choose, in the memories you build, in the relationships you invest in while the people you love are still available to share them with. Wealth is not a destination, it is a resource, and a resource that is never deployed is not wealth, it is just a number. Thomas was a 51-year-old civil engineer who had been saving with the discipline of someone who had read every book in this series twice. His portfolio was strong, his freedom number was within reach, and he had not taken a significant holiday in 6 years because he was waiting until the portfolio hit a specific threshold before he allowed himself to feel that the spending was justified. He read Perkins' first chapter and sat with a question he had been avoiding. If not now, when exactly? Not in theory, in specific years. He calculated, using Perkins' framework, that the experience of hiking through Patagonia with his 23-year-old son, which he had been deferring for 4 years, required a version of himself that was physically capable of the hike, and a version of his son who was still available for a 3-week trip with his father. The window was not permanently open, it had a specific season. He booked the trip within a week of finishing the chapter. He did not wait for the threshold. He understood for the first time that the threshold had always been a proxy for permission he could have given himself at any point. The second key insight is the one that most directly challenges the conventional financial planning model, and it is the one that makes most financial advisors deeply uncomfortable. Your ability to convert money into meaningful experience is not constant across your lifetime. It peaks, and then it declines. Perkins calls this the concept of net worth versus life energy. You accumulate net worth over time, but your life energy, your physical capacity, your health, your mobility, your mental vitality, the specific relational contexts that make certain experiences possible, follows a completely different curve. It peaks somewhere in midlife and then begins a long, gradual decline that accelerates in the final decades. The implication is radical. $1 spent on an experience at 45 produces more return, more memory, more meaning, more identity than the same dollar spent on the same experience at 75. Not because the experience is less valuable at 75, but because your capacity to inhabit it fully is genuinely diminished. Robbins showed us the 5 levels of financial freedom. Perkins adds a dimension Robbins did not include. At what age does each level of financial freedom actually matter to you? Because level 4 financial freedom, covering your current lifestyle plus your dreams, is worth dramatically more at 50 than at 80. The dream must be timed to the season in which it is most fully possible. The wealth edit is not just about building enough, it is about deploying it when it counts. Victor was a 48-year-old GP who had been planning to travel extensively in retirement. He had a specific list: Japan and cherry blossom season, a road trip through Iceland, a cooking course in Bologna, a month in Vietnam. The list had existed for 11 years. The retirement was 12 years away. He read Perkins' second chapter and did a calculation he had never thought to do before. He mapped each experience on his list against his current physical capacity and his current relational availability. His mother was 79 and had always wanted to see Japan. His closest friend had recently been diagnosed with an illness that made long-haul travel increasingly complicated. The Japan trip that existed as a future retirement dream was in fact a present-moment window that was actively closing while he optimized his portfolio for a future version of the trip that would have fewer of the people and less of the embodied vitality that made the trip meaningful. He took 2 weeks of leave. He went to Japan with his mother. He told me it was the most significant financial decision he had ever made, not because of what it cost, but because of what it would have cost not to make it. The third key insight is Perkins' most counterintuitive and arguably most important financial reframe, and it is the one that connects most directly to Ecker's blueprint work in Schwartz neuroscience. Invest in experiences early, not when you can afford to, now. Because experiences are not simply things you purchase and consume, they are investments that generate compounding returns in the form of memory dividends. Perkins' concept of the memory dividend is this: a meaningful experience, a trip taken, a course completed, a relationship deepened through shared time, a physical challenge met, continues to generate positive return long after the experience itself is over. You carry it in your identity. You reference it in conversation. It shapes how you see yourself and what you believe you are capable of. It compounds, not financially, experientially. And experiences taken earlier in life have more time to compound, more years of memory dividend than the same experience taken decades later. Schwartz neuroscience confirms this directly. Rich experiential memories create and strengthen neural pathways, specifically the neural architecture of a person who inhabits their life fully rather than defers it. The brain of someone who is consistently invested in meaningful experiences is measurably different from the brain of someone who has consistently deferred them, not just emotionally, structurally, neurologically. The memory dividend is biological. Sung was a 34-year-old graphic designer who had been operating under the belief that experiences were a reward for financial achievement rather than a component of it. He had a modest income, a growing savings rate, and a deep conviction that the experiences he wanted, a 3-month creative residency in Lisbon, a photography course in Tokyo, a solo trek through Nepal, belonged to a future version of himself who had earned them through sufficient accumulation. Perkins' memory dividend framework broke that equation permanently. He began calculating not the financial cost of the experiences, but the memory dividend they would generate, and comparing that return against the return of the same capital sitting in his index portfolio for another 3 years. For some experiences, the memory dividend calculation was decisive. The residency in Lisbon, which would build his creative identity, his professional network, his Portuguese, and his sense of himself as someone who makes bold creative commitments, had a return profile that no index fund could match. He did not cash out his portfolio, he restructured his savings allocation to include an experience fund alongside his freedom fund. The experiences were no longer deferred rewards, they were concurrent investments in the person his freedom fund was ultimately building toward. The fourth key insight is the one that most directly addresses relationships, and it is the one that lands hardest for most people who encounter this book at exactly the right moment. Give while you are alive. Do not wait for the estate. Perkins spends a significant portion of Die with Zero on the mathematics and the philosophy of intergenerational giving, and his argument is both financially precise and emotionally undeniable. The conventional pattern is to accumulate wealth across a lifetime and transfer it to children or causes at death. But Perkins identifies a profound inefficiency in this pattern. A gift of $50,000 to a 30-year-old child has dramatically more impact than the same gift to a 55-year-old who receives it as an inheritance after the giver is gone. The 30-year-old can use it to start the business, make the down payment, take the risk, invest in the education, launch the career that would otherwise require another decade of saving. The 55-year-old, however grateful, may have already solved those problems through their own accumulation. The optimal time to give is when the recipient can most effectively use the gift, which is almost always decades before the conventional inheritance model delivers it. Murphy taught us that the subconscious programs of money and generosity were installed in childhood. Perkins teaches us that the most powerful financial program you can install in the next generation is not an inheritance they receive after you die. It is the experience of generosity, abundance, and possibility that you model and deliver while you are alive, and they are in the season of life where it can most change their trajectory. Jerome was a 62-year-old retired teacher with 3 adult children in their late 20s and early 30s. He had a modest but meaningful estate, the product of 4 decades of careful saving, and had always assumed it would transfer to his children at his death. He read Perkins' 4th chapter and did a calculation that changed his planning completely. His eldest daughter was 31 and had been trying to save a down payment on a home in a market that kept moving faster than she could save. His son was 28 and had a business idea he had been unable to fund. His youngest was 26 and had an opportunity to complete a professional qualification that would double her earning capacity, but required 3 years of reduced income. Jerome could solve all 3 situations now with money he did not need and would not spend, and watch the impact unfold over the remaining years of his life. Or he could hold the estate intact and deliver it a decade or more after the optimal moment for each child had passed. The answer, once he had calculated it clearly, was not difficult. He gave early. He gave intentionally. He gave in amounts calibrated to the specific opportunity each child faced. He told me afterwards that watching his children deploy those resources in real time, seeing the business launch, the home purchased, the qualification completed, generated more meaning than any financial return his estate account had ever produced. The 5th key insight is the one that closes the Die with Zero framework and closes the Wealth at It series simultaneously. And Perkins delivers it with the same quiet force that has characterized every chapter of this book. Use all your resources, not recklessly, optimally. Time bucket your life. Divide your remaining years into seasons, and for each season, ask what experiences are most fully possible in that season and not in others. What requires the physical capacity of this decade? What requires the relational context of this moment? What requires the financial resources you currently have and will not require greater resources to become meaningful? And then, invest in those experiences with the same deliberateness, the same strategic intentionality, the same willingness to override short-term caution in service of long-term outcome that you have brought to every other aspect of your financial life across this series. The Wealth at It has been building a complete picture across 8 books. Household gave us the inner landscape of the money story. Sincero gave us the energy of the leap. Kiyosaki gave us the architecture of assets. Ecker gave us the blueprint and the freedom to rewrite it. Clayson gave us the ancient laws that never stop working. Robbins gave us the game in the rules. Swart gave us the neuroscience, the brain beneath the practice. And Perkins gives us the answer to the only question that makes all of it worth building. He gives us the life, the actual, fully inhabited, experience-rich, memory-dense, generosity-expressed life that all of this building was always meant to fund. Not someday, now. in the season in which it is most fully possible. Raphael was a 45-year-old accountant who had spent 20 years being excellent at managing other people's financial lives and cautious to the point of paralysis about his own. He had the knowledge, he had the discipline, he had a portfolio that would have made most people in his income bracket deeply satisfied, and he had a list of things he had been meaning to do for 15 years that had not moved. Not because he lacked the resources, because he had developed a relationship with deferral so deeply habitual that the doing had come to feel less real than the planning. He read Die with Zero in a single sitting on a Sunday afternoon. He closed the book and wrote one sentence in his journal. "I have been planning my life as if there will always be another season." He identified his current season, 45, physically strong, professionally established, children in their early teens, parents in their late 70s, and he asked what this specific season made possible that no other season would. He planned a month-long trip to Portugal with his father, who had emigrated from there at 22 and never returned. He enrolled his teenagers in a summer program that had been on the list for 3 years. He made a financial gift to his sister, whose small business had been struggling. He did all 3 in the same month. He told me that the month cost him more than he had ever spent in a single month, and that it had returned more than any month of his life. 5 ways to apply Die with Zero to your manifestation and wealth practice this week. 1. Write your experience bucket list this week. Not a vague someday list, a seasonally mapped list. For each experience, identify the season of your life in which it is most fully possible, and ask honestly whether that season is now or later. Because later is not a neutral choice. Later has costs that compound just as surely as money does. 2. Calculate the memory dividend on your top 3 deferred experiences. What would each one return in terms of identity, relationship, meaning, and ongoing memory value if you took it in the next 12 months versus in 10 years? The calculation is not financial, but it is real, and it is worth making explicitly rather than leaving it as a vague intention. 3. Identify one relational investment you have been deferring. One person you love who you have been meaning to spend real time with. One shared experience that exists on a list rather than in a calendar. Put it in the calendar this week. The relational window is as time-sensitive as the physical one. 4. If you have wealth you do not need and people in your life who could use it now, consider the optimal timing of generosity. Not the estate plan, the present moment. Who in your life is in a season where a specific resource from you could change the trajectory of their next decade? 5. Run your miracle morning this week with Perkins' time bucket framework as your visualization anchor. What season of life are you in right now? What is most fully possible in this season and not in others? What are you building your wealth to ultimately fund, and is any of that available to you now? Your 7-day Die with Zero challenge. Day 1. Write your experience bucket list mapped to life seasons. For each experience, ask which season makes it most possible. Day 2. Identify your top 3 deferred experiences and calculate the memory dividend of taking them now versus in 10 years. Day 3. Identify one relational window that is currently open and will not always be, and take one action to invest in it this week. Day 4. Review your current budget for an experience allocation, a dedicated fund for memory dividend investments running in parallel with your Freedom Fund. Day 5. Identify one gift you could give now to someone in your life who is in the season where it would most change their trajectory. Day 6. Write your time bucket plan for your current life season.
What is most possible now that will not be equally possible in 10 years? Day 7. Read all 8 Wealth Edit frameworks back to back in a single sitting, Housel to Perkins, and notice the complete picture they form together.
Drop one word in the comments that describes what changes when you realize the life you have been building toward is available to you now. Just one word. I read every single one. Die with zero is not an instruction to be reckless. It is an instruction to be present, to be intentional, to treat your life, not just your portfolio, is something worth actively managing, actively investing in, and actively inhabiting in every season it offers you. You have now completed the Wealth Edit, 8 books, 8 frameworks, 1 complete system for building a life that is as rich in experience and meaning as it is in financial architecture. Housel to Perkins, psychology to purpose, in every step of the way the same truth has been pointing at the same destination. The wealth is not the point. The life the wealth makes possible, when deployed with the courage, the timing, and the intentionality this series has been building in you, that is the point. Thank you for being part of the Wealth Edit by CosmiReads. Thank you for building something real across these 8 videos. Hit the like button if this series has changed something fundamental in how you see both your money and your life. Subscribe and hit the bell because Series 3 is coming, and it goes deeper than anything we have built so far. Your free downloads for this video are in the description, and the complete Wealth Edit playlist is linked below. Share it with someone who needs it. Thank you for being part of CosmiReads. Manifest, read, rise.